Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of From No Crypto to No Crypto. I'm your host and crypto coach, Blockchain Wayne. Today we're joined by Rahul. Rahul is with the Surfing Trader, but so much more. Rahul, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm excited to be here. And thanks for having me. I know you're busy, so I appreciate this.
Oh, absolutely, man. Look, when you first reached out, we connected, definitely, and I saw what your story was and what you've done. This is more important than just learning about Bitcoin and crypto, but really some life lessons as well. So excited to have you on today.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, man. So Rahul, before we jump into, obviously this podcast is about crypto and crypto basics and things that are happening in the industry with Bitcoin and others. But before we jump into that, you've got a rich history, a lot of life lessons learned. So you can tell us a little bit about your background. Maybe starting with you sold a tech company about 10 years ago. So can you tell us kind of that progression leading up to that sale and what kind of company it was?
Yeah, so it was a hell of a ride, an interesting ride. So I went to law school at Stanford. I say I got in because of luck, but I guess you don't get into that law school from luck. But my intention was never to be an attorney. It was to build and sell a company. So really the first thing I did when in school is all of Google's lawyers would come to Stanford and they would be guest lecturers, guest teachers. And so I very quickly became friends with some of them, and I learned what kind of companies Google was looking to buy at the time. I also learned that if you did something they didn't like, they would send you about 10 cease and desists, and then they would offer to buy you. If you didn't go with the buy on the 11th cease and desist, they were going to sue you and they were going to destroy you. So I was like, well, I'll keep all that in mind. And so what I did was at the time, and I'll make this long story very short, I went and found a team of engineers to break their algorithm, to basically hack their algorithm and create almost a black hat SEO model where I was putting people on first page of Google over and over again within days, as opposed to, we know it takes a long time.
Right.
And Google couldn't figure out how I was doing it. And so they started sending me cease and desist, which I ignored. I actually framed them in my office, right? I had them framed. And at the 9th one, I went in to negotiate a deal. And they offered me, I think it was like 3 million. I said 30 million. We settled on 10 million. And it was really more of an IP sale than technology. I hadn't developed any technology, but what I had done was I found a way to break their algorithm. And when I say I mean, I hired very smart engineers. I am semi-retarded, or I'm not the brightest, right? But I found people that were much smarter than me, who knew what they were doing, and I was the voice, if you will. And that's all I did. And so what we did was, and what Google did at the time, they had the same team of engineers that were doing their coding on algorithm. Coders and coding is like, it's like a language. And if you can tell who is speaking the language, every person who speaks has tells in their language. And some of the things these coders were doing is because they thought they were smarter than everybody in the world. Their arrogance was their hubris, right? Yeah. So they were putting in backdoors into their code all the time, kind of as a joke, right? Like, we're going to put this in and no one's going to find it. Well, we knew what their tell was, and we knew where to look for the back door, and that's how we found it. What Google has done since then is they now change out their coding team, right, to avoid that. And they learned that after buying this company. And they very quickly shut down all the clients. We had about 100 clients paying us between $50,000 and $70,000 a month because they could get on the first page of Google instantly.
Yeah. Yeah, it almost sounds like it would have been worth keeping that going, but you're right. You were at that 9th.
Yeah, I was at that point where they were going to annihilate me.
Yeah.
And I wasn't ready for that. So.
Gotcha. Interesting stuff. So you sold the company to Google, and tell me about life from there. What happened?
So the other thing that was going on at that time is I was a raging alcoholic, right? I was actively using enormous amounts of alcohol, cocaine, other things that no one should be using. And I was crazy. And my only regulator up until that point was money, right? It is, if it was too much money, I wasn't going to do it. But when you have, And for a guy that was, I'm 46 now, that was about, it's like 11 years ago, 12, 13 years ago. For me at that point, that was, like it might have been trillions of dollars. And I just started blowing through that money like it was going out of style. In that time, I got a divorce. My ex, I have nothing negative to say about my ex-wife. She was an amazing human being, a kind human being. She had a beautiful soul. But she had had enough. She's like, listen, you got to get sober or get out. One of the two. I can't do this anymore. And so I chose to get out instead of getting sober. I couldn't get sober. I tried. I went to AA. I did a lot of stuff. I just could not get sober.
Yeah.
And so we got a divorce in 2013. We got a divorce. And I did the thing that no alcohol addict or drug addict should ever do. I decided to go on a solo motorcycle trip through South America because that was intelligent.
Oh.
And I didn't know how to ride a motorcycle. So I learned. I crashed a bunch of times. And while I was down in South America, I made some very good contacts for illegal business. And I started to I used my legal background, and I started laundering money for the cartels. In 2000, so this all happened very quickly, right? At the very beginning of 2013, end of 2012 is when I got the divorce. I'd sold the company about a year before. And so I spent all of 2013, all of 2014, and part of 2015 in Colombia in the US doing this business. At the time, I was probably clearing about $30 million a year as take-home pay, right? If you want to call it take-home pay. What ended up happening was at some point in this disaster of a life, I started to get more and more and more depressed. And I tried to end it. Thank God I was really bad at that. And then one day, after a major car accident, totaling my car, evading law enforcement, this whole shit show, I woke up at home and I looked in the mirror and for the first time in many, many years, I prayed. And it was a prayer which I looked in the mirror into my own eyes and I said, God, and I didn't think I was God, but I figured God was listening. I said, God, either get me sober or kill me, but I don't want to live this way anymore. And this thought popped up and it said, go to an AA meeting right now. Now, I never liked AA for a lot of reasons, but I went. And that was my sobriety date. That was December 19th, 2015. And so I've been sober ever since. I haven't had any drugs or alcohol since that day. And that's a little over 9 years ago. And so, but I was still running this business. And so I went to my sponsor 6 months after, running this thing. And I said, hey, Bill, his name was Bill. I said, Bill, I'm still running this business. What do I do? I can't just walk away, right? I'll be killed. He said, you need to turn yourself into the FBI. And so I did. I went that day to the FBI station in San Francisco, and I turned myself in. They looked at me and said, you're full of shit. You're making this up. There's none of this is true. None of this is real. Get out of here. And so I kept running the business. I tried to tone operations down, but I kept running it, praying and hoping that they would open up an investigation, which they did. And 6 months later, and I say this all the time because I speak at AA meetings a lot, I said, God did for me what I could not do for myself. And 9 federal agencies took my front door down. The FBI, the DEA, the IRS. And it was finally over. I remember being arrested and and I had a huge smile on my face. And the detective with the FBI said, why are you smiling? Do you realize how much trouble you're in? I said, because it's finally over. It's finally over. I don't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I can live like a decent life. And then I think life really began. All my assets were seized except for the Bitcoin, which they just didn't find. And then a law was changed. So I can say that now. Law was changed, and that's no longer something they can ever come after. And that's when I think life got really interesting. Is I did go to prison, federal prison. And while I was there, I got to be of a lot of service. We helped set up GED programs. We helped guys get educated. We helped guys get sober. It was probably, I know this is going to sound crazy to say, but jail was one of the best experiences I could have ever had. It made me so humble and so grateful for the life I get to live today. And then I came out of jail and I started a new company, and I'm, a legal company. And I have a life today that I'm very, very, very grateful for. And I don't believe anyone who's ever kicked down by their own doing or by the doing of others has any reason to ever stay down. We as human beings always have the ability to get back up, no matter how bad the trauma was. And I've had very ugly trauma in my childhood. No matter how bad it was, no matter how ugly it was, no matter how hard life is, we can always get back up.
Right. Yeah, that was the main part I really wanted to highlight. Like, after hearing your story, is so many people think when something bad happens, they have this immediate thought like their life is over. Life is never going to be good again. It's going to be, it's, and that's what people need to realize. It's not, nothing is over. Whether you've done something bad, whether you've lost everything, there's so much opportunity in this life. We just have to be willing to see it and seize it. So it's safe to say too, I mean, wouldn't you say that, what would you find more fulfilling? Was the work you were able to do in prison, or was selling your company to Google?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't the company. I mean, that definitely wasn't it. It was the work I was able to do. I mean,
Right.
one of the, I remember calling my mom. My parents weren't happy, to say the least, right? I'm a firstborn Indian kid, and so, but I remember calling my mom, and she said, listen, if you really want to give back to your dad and I, give away the education that was so freely given to you, right? And I said, well, how do I do that, right? And so what I realized is, yeah, there's a lot of guys. Now, listen, I'm not somebody who doesn't believe in police and thinks every criminal should. I'm not that guy. If anything, if I fell on a side of the spectrum, I'd fall more conservative than I do liberal. However, one of the things I saw a lot was part of the reason recidivism rates are so high is these guys who are in prison, they have no education. So if you put them out and say, just don't commit a crime again, well, that's great, but they can't read and they can't write and they can't get a job in a union. And so the only thing left for someone to do is to go and back to doing what they know how to do, to put food on the table for their 8 kids. And these guys have lots of kids, and they have, so what I realized was, I'm not going to try to be a moral educator on you shouldn't drink or you shouldn't use drugs. It's not my place. But what I can do is give people an education. And I'm not a fan of dragging somebody to water and then forcing them to drink. That's not me. But if the water is available, right? If the education is available. So we set up a prison poetry project, and we created this project where it was open for anyone to join and make a commitment to stay for 6 months. Well, these guys who barely could read and barely could write were producing phenomenal poetry. And in the process of creating poetry, they were improving their English and they were improving their grammar. And lo and behold, the original prison poetry project was 80 guys. It's a decent sample size. Of those 80 guys, all of them, all 80, had multiple criminal records. I mean, they had been in and out of prison for years. Of the 80, only 50 have not reoffended. So 30 have reoffended, gone back into jail.
Right.
Currently, the number of reoffenses is 95%. So this has beat the odds significantly. Yeah. The only thing we have done is we gave them education, and then we gave something fun to be in a fun way to use that education, right? Because what are they doing with the poems? They write the poems, they submit the poems, they get positive feedback on the poems from society. It's a different type of reward system. One reward system is going and making money from selling drugs and getting attention. It's bad attention, but attention from getting back in the system. The other reward system is a positive reward system. And that's really all we did. And to me, that's far more fulfilling, Wayne, far more fulfilling than selling a company and making money.
Absolutely. Bigger impact. Everybody wants that shot to, make it big, sell it, sell a company like that to a big shot like Google or any of these other large companies. But at the same time, it's more about the impact, and you've learned that as well. So as we move down, all right, so we started selling the company. your life where you were headed to prison and then in prison, and now after prison, what has life been like since? And
Yeah,
also want
so
to dive into how Bitcoin's played a part in that.
it's been interesting. So one of I'll tell you the way that Bitcoin's played. So I bought about 100 coins 10 years ago, and I still have them. I check once in a while to make sure the credentials for the wallet work, and they do, and
Right.
then I don't look at them for 2 more years or something.
There you go.
Yeah, that's just, and I honestly, I think my kids are gonna get those, because the way I've looked at Bitcoin is a store of value. I've been to El Salvador where they have converted as and I think it's a beautiful system. I wish more governments did that. And in fact, if you want to buck the International Monetary Fund as a country, that's the best thing to do is to go to Bitcoin as your currency. But I think where Bitcoin played a role in that was, so what I did afterwards is I started this company called the Surfing Trader. My dad, when we were kids, my brother and I were kids, my dad put my brother and I through this, he put us through through a commodities and Forex trading school. He started when I was like 6, okay? And then he made us stay in the school till we're 18. It's a skill I've always used to raise money. The first company I had, I used Forex trading to raise money for that. What I wanted to do with the Surfing Trader was develop a system where I traded for people, where it was a copy trading business, where I didn't teach them how to trade. I just did the trading for them. And then I just took a percentage if I won. The way that I think where Bitcoin influenced that idea in a big way is this idea of freedom. And again, going back to this education, the only reason I even looked at Bitcoin at the time 10 years ago was I thought, for a very small investment, this could be a massive store of value, right? And if not, I invested something and it was a lost investment. I had a lot of lost investments, and that's all it was. I mean, I just looked at it logically from a perspective of store of value, and I'm always looking at store of values. So I have a lot of gold. And so that's really, and this idea of freedom. I think what I love about Bitcoin is to me, it represents freedom. Store of values, gold, what all it represents is financial freedom. So you now are not tied to how much you're making, right? If I decided to stop earning a dime today, I would still be fine for the rest of my life, because I've invested in assets that store wealth.
Absolutely.
Right. So, which varies in certain places. That varies in certain parts of Texas. That's probably huge wells that have lots of water, right? Forever water, or in certain places, oil, right? It just depends on where you are and what that is. And so what the Surfing Trader is, or what the Surfing Trader does, is we trade for other people. And the way that we work is I don't think anyone should ever give anybody their money unless they know it works. So the way our system works is we first give you a demo account with the amount that you would eventually want to put in. And then you see if that works well. And then once that works well, we give you another demo account. So it's like a 3-month process before we touch somebody's money. Then we give, or 2-month process. Then we give another demo account with the amount of money they're going to start with, which is normally between $500 and $1,000. And then you see how that goes. And then if you're happy with all those results thus far, you put in $1,000 and you trade it and you pay us a commission. And then you put in the amount of money that you want to put in. So that's how our system works. We do not do anything else. I've had a lot of clients say, well, no, let me just give you my money. I came as a referral. I'm sorry, I don't do that. And the reason I don't do that is I have grown up with very strict financial systems. I know many other people haven't, and many people are willing to throw their money at things that will maybe, cross your fingers, benefit you. I don't do that. I prefer to do things in a very systematic way. And the targets we're always going for is 10 to 15% wins for that month. So that's what we've done. That's what the Surfing Trader is. I'm not selling a tool. I'm not selling I'm just trading for other people using copy trade.
Right. So those people are sending the money to you, or are they keeping it in their own exchange?
Everything stays in their own account. I'll have access to their MT4, and their MT, and they pay me the commission. I can't pull the money. I don't want, I've had people say, here's my whole account. I don't want your whole account. I don't want to have access to your money. Just pay me a commission, which I can tell what I've made.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good thing to do, because there are so many trading scams out there where people will be asked to send their money to them.
Yeah,
and people need to realize, like, there's tools out there, like the way you do it. And I've seen a lot of the legitimate ones. It's you get an API, or you get like their MetaTrader, to where you can trade back and forth, but you don't have withdrawal permissions, right? It's just being able to execute the trades, and that kind of makes sense. I mean, you would ask what would happen. I guess one people's question would be, what happens if someone doesn't pay you your commission? Well, then I guess they get cut off, right?
Yeah, they just get cut off. Yeah. It's a very simple, like the thing I've always believed is, if someone doesn't pay me once, well, they probably really needed that money more than I do, and I just won't work with them again.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense. Because I mean, really, this business, both sides, is really about trust, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you've set up the system to where people can trust that there's no way to run off with that money, and you got to trust that they're going to pay you, and it makes sense. It's just kind of like, it's almost like if you were a landlord and you had a piece of property and you had somebody that constantly wouldn't pay you when rent was due, you wouldn't want to work with that person. Well, landlord can't really kick them out, but in this type of business, you'd be like, okay, you can choose who you work with and who not.
Right.
So what have you seen from that? I mean, you mentioned some people just want to blindly give you the money, and unfortunately, those are the people that will go somewhere else probably and get scammed if they don't do it the right way.
Yeah, so I've seen some this has been a very interesting journey, right? So one of the things I've learned is that there's certain pairs that I only trade, like Swiss yen and Aussie yen, and USD yen. Those are the pairs. Only trade those pairs, because I have found over the years that I understand the way those markets work far better than other markets. The other thing I learned very interestingly is about human behavior is this idea that so I never risk more than per trade, never risk more than 0.5% of the total account, the total equity, not the account, but the total equity. And there's never more than 0.5% running at any given time, right? There's just never more than that in the market. What I have found that's been very interesting, and even for people that have been with me for 3, 4, 5 years, is they're like, listen, this 0.5% thing's really successful. Just make it 5%, make it 8. I'm like, are you effing crazy? Do you know how do you know how legitimately dangerous that is? And just because I have a good win rate, so my standard win rate's about 60%. Even though I have a good win rate, that means 40% of the time I lose.
Yeah.
Right. And if you have one of those trades as a 5% on a losing trade, you just lost 5% of your account. And it still blows my mind, Wayne. I mean, it just shocks me that people think that way.
Yeah, they don't understand. They only see upside. They only think upside, not the downside. And it seems like that formula would be completely thrown off doing anything more than what you got it. Yeah, and that's the thing about systems and strategies is when executed and tested properly, they work great. And most people fail. Even people that are trading for themselves. I've learned this personally trading is when I get greedy and I start straying away from my strategy that I had set in place. That's when things can get pretty messy. And
that's when things
created some regret, right?
Some regret. I've created a lot of regret.
I'm talking about me. Yeah, saying
I've created lots of regret in my life from not following my rules. The other thing I did, and this was probably one of the most helpful things I did, was I created not a bot, but I created an indicator of sorts that based on my rules and not my eyes, but my rules, just sends me a text when there is a good trade. And then it doesn't send me text. And so I won't even look at my charts unless I've gotten a text saying there's a trade set up. Go look right now.
Right.
And that has been the most helpful because emotion is the killer to trading.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And not only that, I mean, people think trading like you have to be in the market all the time. and it's really not. You just have to find like those optimal moments. So this may lead into what I was going to ask next, but the tech system that you have set up, is that like a AI generated type thing where it's automated, or?
Yeah, so it sort of. It was AI built. It wasn't originally AI built. It was coded by I hired coders, and now that we have amazing technology, I've fed it into AI to get it more refined, but I now see that the best trades that I've ever had over the years. Oh, the other thing that I think is important is I document everything, and I think people in general should be documenting anytime they do anything financially. It should be documented. Something I'll get back to your answer, but something I have my kids do today is my kids get. I don't give them an allowance per se, but for doing things in the house, they get money, right?
Right.
In order to keep getting that money, they have a very strict record of every dime they spend. And so on Sunday, when I pay them for the week, I get to see everything they spent the money on and how much they put into savings.
Wow.
And the reason for that is I want their brains to start understanding what you look at grows and what you don't look at, you lose.
Yeah.
And so going back to this, so when I documented my trades and looked, I saw that the best trades took place between 8 a.m. and 1400 UTC, right? Which is like basically the middle of the night for me.
Yeah.
And then 9 in the morning. And so I said, okay. And then when did the worst trades take place? And those were like morning my time. I'm in mountain time. So like 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. So I just cut out all trades from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Nice.
And then I also found the best trades were Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Bad trades on Monday, bad trades on Friday. So I cut those days out. So now I only take trades in a 2-hour block, the end of that UTC block. So from basically 12 noon to 2 p.m., which is like 5 in the morning to 9 in the morning, or 5 in the morning to 7 in the morning. Those are the only times I trade 3 days a week. That's it. And that has been incredibly lucrative.
Nice. Is that how you could come up with the name Surfing Trader?
Yeah, so that's when I trade in the mornings and then I go and surf. I haven't surfed in a few days, but I surf almost every day. I train jiu-jitsu every day, and then I'm a dad. And it's a nice life. It's a life I really appreciate.
Nice.
By the way, I'm a terrible surfer. So if you ever saw me, I mean, I'm bad. If you ever saw me, you'd be like, is he surfing or holding a board in the water?
So trading, make a living, surfing, never going to make a living from surfing, right?
Never.
You make a living so you can surf and you get better. Gotcha. Nice. And this has been a great conversation when you think about it, because we didn't talk a lot about Bitcoin, but I think you really nailed why Bitcoin is important, what you're seeing that's happening with Bitcoin, but everything around it. And it's really, that's how I want most people to think about this. This is not a 24/7 thing, have to be in the market all the time. Accumulate wealth, figure out strategies that work, and stick to them. And so it's been, this conversation has been amazing. I wish we had a lot more time. I usually like to keep the podcast right under 30 minutes, but I definitely want people to know where they can find out more about Surfing Trader, get some information from you. So where can they follow you at?
So my email right now is the best, rahul@thesurfingtrader.com. And then I will have information about the Prison Poetry Project that's still going on if you want to get involved with that. Or if you're interested in working with me, it will be a slow process. I'm not going to just take your money. I want to make sure you're comfortable. You see it and I see it, that it works.
Absolutely.
And I would love to be on your podcast again. This was a blast.
Yeah. Well, we'll do it. I wanted to definitely cover your background and everything. So I'd say we schedule another one to talk more about Bitcoin specifically and the journey, because we had some conversation offline about, from reading the Bitcoin Standard and some other insight you have. So we'll definitely go into that some more on another episode. So definitely want to thank you again for joining us. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.